Edition of Prolifick Profiles right here on Prolifick Radio, www.prolifick.com. Today we're honored to have Mr. George T. Henry of G10 Services Incorporated right here on Prolifick. For those who may not know, George I look at him as a celebrity because he's actually tied to Serena and Venus. He was actually their coach, and he was actually on tour with their father, who just had a best-selling book. Hey, George, how you doing?
How's it going?
Hey, good. First of all, I want to say thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here on Prolifick. I know you have a busy schedule, but we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So, it's funny. We talk about, everyone's always talking about the Lehigh Valley and Allentown and things of that nature. But here you are. You're touching greatness. You know what I'm saying? These are great people that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And, people don't. You're like the best kept secret.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're really cool. It's like I said, it's an honor to have you here. So tell us, tennis. How did you get into that? You're in there. So tell us about it.
Hey, that's kind of funny. Tennis. Probably I got into tennis very late, as most people would see it. I was going into the 9th grade, and we were actually living in Connecticut, Ledger, Connecticut. And a buddy of mine, we just started playing, and we go down to the community center and play. But before then, I had played other sports. I played organized sports from 6-year-old, all the way up until 14, 15. And I made a transition into playing tennis. We actually moved from Connecticut, moved to Wilmington, North Carolina, and right before we moved, I had just read a book, actually, the autobiography of Athalia Gibson. Athalia Gibson was the first black person to win the U.S. Open, to win Wimbledon. So we moved down to Wilmington, North Carolina, and it just so happened that the doctor she lived with in Wilmington, North Carolina, was a fraternity brother of my father. So when we moved down there, I read the book, I was excited, and I found out that my dad knew him, and I kind of got introduced to him, and at that point on, after the introduction, I he had a court in the backyard, actually the same court played on, and it just really meant a lot to me. So that was kind of my introduction. Once I went out and spent a few hours playing on my own, kind of would teach me, a couple times a week, and then I played on my high school team in Wilmington, North Carolina, Margaret High School, and I made the high school team and ended up going, played 3 years of high school, 10th, 11th, 12th, lettered in varsity, and then I got a scholarship to a Division II college in North Carolina Central, and I didn't look back.
Just kept it moving.
Ever since, yeah, kept it
awesome.
moving.
So you made that transition to whereas you played, and then you decided to start coaching, or?
Yeah. I kind of fell into it. Really, the coaching part of it was something I started doing more and more because I just needed money, and it was a way to, at the time, coaching you can make $20 an hour.
Wow.
So, for me, that kind of supplemented me going out and playing. I would coach, and then I go out. What happened in college, I played for 3 years, and then I decided with a buddy of mine that played for another college that we were going to go out and play some pro tournaments. I didn't have an idea of what it was or anything, so we trained like beasts and went out there, and we were competitive.
Wow.
It wasn't a barnstorm, I didn't blow people out, but I really learned the game, and I had a passion for the game, and I think that experience helped me to be a better coach. So I kind of transitioned into coaching that way, just from playing. So.
And it's really interesting to me because we talk about Venus and Serena Williams, and how you met them, and with their dad and everything. But you also coached other You know, you have
Yeah.
a lot of people on your resume. You know, now, you know. So how did you? There has to be a formula that you're using, and I don't want you to reveal it.
Right.
But
I mean-
but I mean, you know, what do you think is the you know, because you know, one or two maybe might be, you know, it was luck. But after you have, you know, you have a resume of people who are in their top tier players.
You know, it's kind of funny, you know, that you would say that. The reason I really got into coaching and even tennis, I just had a passion, and through that passion, I wanted others to come after me and not have to go through the same thing I went through. Financial things or just emotional and mental things that a lot of players tend to have to go to. But for me, it was a little different because being a minority and being a black, there wasn't really a pathway. There wasn't really many success stories of people doing it before me. Athelia Gibson, yeah, that was different. She was a whole different, you know, situation and a different time of the game. I came through right after Arthur Ashe. And, you know, Arthur Ashe was really somebody I looked up to, but there wasn't a clear way of doing or being
Because there was
successful at it.
very few and far between.
And so what happened with me was my passion was really to focus on giving an opportunity to a lot of other players that were minorities that maybe families didn't support them, but they wanted to go out there and compete. And I just kind of gravitated towards black players.
Okay.
And most of my successes have been, I think I could relate a little bit better. And, you know, I kind of just drove. I had passion, you know, and belief that they could be successful even when they didn't think they could be successful.
Wow.
So
Now, you know, you've been doing this for a while, you know, and I know that, you know, I mean, you know, even with Venus and Serena, and it's still not a huge amount of, you know, black African Americans in the game. I mean,
agree.
people are coming in. Now, I'm thinking that there aren't that many players, so I'm thinking as far as coaches go, there might have even be, you know, I mean, is that what you found?
I'm finding that, but I've also found too that I mean, you're young, you know, young minority, you know, a black male. It's just very, very hard for us to do non-traditional things. I mean, a lot of our own people. For me, for instance, my family, you know, my father and my mother, they were you know, college educated. They had, you know, middle class. I grew up. My dad was an officer in the Army, but they really didn't have the support or the belief that I could do what I ended up doing in tennis until after the fact. So all these odds against us, and we still have to. I think the passion was what really drove me. I didn't wait on somebody to teach me or to explain things to me. I tried to go out and gather as much information. Some of it was wrong information, but I was able to decipher that and able to, you know, figure things out and adopt a process that I think was tailored for me. So
sometimes I think we as African Americans, we take the road less taken simply because we don't have that path. Because I'm thinking, here you are, professional tennis. I mean, and it's so funny because you said you and your boy, y'all went out, and it reminds me of me and my best friend Vince. We did the same thing. We hit, you know, we said, look, we're going to do this business. We're going to go out, and it's like we don't really know all the facets, but we know what we're going to do when we get there. And I mean, because I'm thinking, you're talking about finance, and you're talking about sponsorship, and you're talking about all these things that most of the time the average professional tennis player has offices or teams of people, and it's just you. You know, you and your boy, y'all like, we're going to get out here. How was that experience? I mean, what did it?
I mean, for me, it was you know, I never gave it up completely. I took time off, and you know, I'd have to reroute my pathway, but it just made me callous, you know, to a lot of the negative stuff, and I just said, hey man, I'm dedicating my life to this. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to figure it out.
And you did, and that's awesome. Now, when did you first meet the Williams sisters?
I met them, and it was funny. I met their father. The story behind that was when my sister had just graduated from Florida A&M in Tallahassee, Florida, and I was actually out playing and, you know, back and forth playing on the circuit and working, you know. So she needed help moving. She had actually gotten a job and she had done an intern, gotten a job when she graduated. She was actually Miss Florida A&M.
Oh, okay.
Before she left Florida A&M, and back in 1994, she ends up getting a job in South Florida, and she ends up moving to Jupiter, Florida. She had just bought a place, and Jupiter then was different now. With a lot of Major League Baseball training camps and everything down there. Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods, they were nowhere around back then. But so she bought a little townhouse, and I helped her move down from Tallahassee to there. And I end up, I knew a few people down in South Florida, so I liked the weather.
Yeah.
I said, hey, this could be a base for me. So we worked it out, and I ended up getting a little teaching job down there, and I started teaching. And then through meeting people, I ended up running into, Mr. Williams. So, he was going through a transition where he had moved from Compton, California to South Florida, and he had been down there, I think, about 6 months to 8 months. And I knew one of the guys that was actually working with them at the time. His name was Gerard Jabady. So Gerard introduced me to Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams and I just started talking, and come to find out we knew some of the same people in California. I knew from tennis, and he knew from raising his girls in tennis. And then he said, okay, would you come out and hit with my daughters one day? So the next day I go out, and I had a commitment in the morning. The previous day I was doing teaching. So I went out in the evening. He said, okay. He put Venus on the court. He said, go ahead and play her. So I played her a set. I beat her, I think 6-1. Then he put Serena on the court. I beat her 6-1. He said, okay, I want to offer you a job. So I actually kind of fell into it that way, and just by chance. And, I looked at it as more of a job. I looked at it like those girls were more like my younger sister. And, a lot of other youngsters, I'm like, look, their father believes in them, and he's, I read the article about them in the LA Times, about they were up and coming and how the father was crazy and this and that.
Yeah, they love to call him
crazy like a fox.
Yeah, exactly,
So
exactly.
it just opened up a whole new door for me, and I think more so we became associates and friends. And maybe he saw something in me that he had gone through being a younger, black man like he was, and we just started working. So,
did you see the greatness in them even back then, or because there was some powerful girls?
Back then, and I actually on my website I think I have a picture of later on that year. Venus had just turned 13 and Serena was still 12. Venus was about my height. I'm only about 5'10", pushing 5'10" maybe. And she was almost eye to eye with me. Serena looked like a little 12-year-old. They were no. I didn't think they were physically any more special than any of the other kids I had seen at the same age. But they went out and they worked day in and day out to get better. And that's one of the things I don't really see a lot of in this sport and in this business. Parents want it more than their kids, and try to take shortcuts, but they worked. And I tell people this, that when they were 12 and 13, our schedule at that time, we would work out 4 hours in the morning, and then we work out 4 hours in the evening.
Wow.
The morning practices, we would drill, we'd work. We didn't do any fitness or anything. Then in the evening, we'd play matches and work on a few more things. But to have a regimen like that at that age, once I saw that, and once I saw how we did that 5 days a week, and on the sixth day, we'd work out 4 to 6 hours straight. I'm like, these girls,
that's dedication.
I knew no one else on the tour
who was doing that.
as an adult was doing that. And I'm like, look, these girls are ahead of the game if they can get it together. They can deal with the pressures of competing, and they're hungry enough, they'll figure it out. So,
Now, I know that on your resume you also talk about how not only do you talk to them about the actual application of the actual playing of tennis, but you also talk about the pressures. Tell us about some of those pressures that,
point in case, the pressure of actually when Serena was coming through on tour, and I can go back to Venus too. When Venus was out there playing, and she was playing a girl at the U.S. Open in the semifinals, and the girl intentionally bumps into her, trying to intimidate her. I had never seen that before on the WTA or even on the men's circuit. But she was a little, I think 15, 16-year-old at the time, and the girl was a grown woman. Spirella was her last name. But I think that form of intimidation, maybe it was really to provoke her, more so than really harm her. So I think dealing with that kind of scenario, you have to be prepared to deal with that some kind of way. With Serena, you know, years later, Serena goes out and plays Indian Wells. I think the first year of her professional series of tournaments, first or second year, she goes out there and she's playing a semifinal match, and you know, people calling her the N-word and all kinds of other names, but she had to hold it together and get through that match, and then she made a decision not to go back and ever play there again. So those are mental and emotional things that if you're not prepared to deal with, they mess you up for life.
And you know what gets me is that you don't really think, because you see on TV this pristine you know, things about that, but you don't ever really think about the people or the attitudes. And I'm sure you've got a lot of different insight. But you know, was it through the training, both the training of you and the father? Because I'm sure after the matches, y'all had long conversations about these kind of things.
I just think I know the mother and the father really after the matches, they more or less focus on, you know, family things and you know, their way. They were actually Jehovah's Witness. They had a whole spiritual background in what they were doing. But not only that, I think leading up to what they were dealing with, our practices and our training was so much pressure and intensity that the real world really was less pressure than dealing with that, you know. And I don't agree with all of that training and everything we did, but it has a lot of merit because I think it really prepared them to deal with whatever things they had to deal with. So for instance, there's a story the father always says, he said it in several interviews, he said, you know, he called me Mr. Hendricks. My name's George Henry, as you say, but that was his pronunciation of my name. We joke about it now. But he said, you know, one thing about it, he said, with myself and Serena, I spent a lot more time with Serena, and we would butt heads. I mean, I was the adult, she was a 12-year-old child, but she was so strong-willed that she would come at me in different ways daily. But I would have to maintain that and control that and be stern with her. Because if I didn't, she would run all over me. But she would go home and she'd complain to mommy and, you know, oh, I can't stand Mr. Henry, he's this and he's that. But Mr. Williams, and I didn't find out until years later, he said, you know, Mr. Henry, I never interfered with that. He said, because I knew how my daughter was. I knew she was stubborn and she was crazy, and I knew you were an adult, and if you didn't handle it as an adult, my child would not respect you as an adult. So you had to, you know, had to deal with that. He said, and also you were crazy just like her too. So we kind of, had that love-hate kind of scenario.
Now that they're grown, and you see them, they're just like in the stratosphere. You know, they're just really blown up. And you know, I know you talked to you were definitely on a book tour with the father. You know, talk about, you mentioned in the book. How does that make you feel? Like, you know, do you feel accomplished? I mean, and like I said before, you've dealt with them, but at the same time, you have others that you've influenced also. You know.
You know, it made me, you know, feel good. I have a lot of friends that have, you know, and it's funny with me. A lot of people don't even realize, they see me on the court or whatever, they don't have a clue. The ones that don't know me don't have a clue that I have a background I have in tennis. And like, for instance, I'm also the high school coach of Allen boys tennis team. So I'm trying to get that program back on track. Which is really, to me, as tough as working with Venus and Serena. So believe it or not. But it just let me know that if you work hard and you really commit yourself, you know, sky's the limit. I mean, I know we say that a lot, but really, I truly believe that. What I've learned from working with those girls and that process we had of working, no amount of money can buy that for me. So I don't know if it's a confidence, a self-confidence, or whatever, but and I battle this every day, you know, with people wanting to disprove me and challenge me. I have kids that go, oh, I'm gonna do it better, but I'm like, look, you got to understand, you're not reinventing anything. The thing about tennis is you have to be emotionally and physically on point, and that's what I try to take from what I've learned with them is you have to be, if you have a task, you have to be prepared to deal with that task. Nothing more, nothing less, and the more and the better you're prepared at it, the more success you'll have.
Now, you had mentioned that you want to get the program started again here locally in the Allentown area, and you have a company called G10 Services Incorporated. Tell us about that.
Basically, that was a kind of an off branch of something that I set up when I was back in '97 and '98 in the city of North Miami. I actually, when I came back to Florida, and I set up camp in North Miami, and I actually got the contract to run a inner city program. And this kind of can give you a little insight of how I operate, you know, non-traditionally. I was introduced to actually a family, the Roll family, actually Asha Roll. And there's a little story about that.
And we're talking about Esther Roll.
Okay.
Because Esther, okay, yeah, they were prominent over there.
Okay,
yeah,
that's
Okay.
interesting.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
And Asha's parents were Asha and her sister Tyra Roll. They lived in Miami Garden, just below North Miami. But the coach they had knew about, and there were 12 tennis courts in the city of North Miami, which was right on the borderline of Opelika. Opelika was probably one of the most depressed places in South Florida, and I didn't know anything about, you know, the demographics or the history of it. But Opelika has a airport there. A lot of people fly in and out of there. Not a commercial, like a freight airport. So anyway, it was on the borderline. But this particular park was a rundown park that nobody had. You know, you really once the lights went out, you had to leave that side of town. It was kind of that rough at the time. And North Miami, on the other side of the east side of town, near the ocean, near the water, they had another facility that the city was putting all this money in. So I ended up moving down, and I get an apartment right across the street from where the other facility was on the east side. It was, what was the name of that place? I forgot. But anyway, so I go in one day and I wanted to hit tennis, which I walked out of my apartment and walked across the street, and I was at the tennis court.
Right.
People looked at me like I was crazy. So I said, wow. So I figured out, okay, let me find out what's going on in the city of North Miami. Then I'm going to build a program on the other side, and I'm going to compete with these people over here on the east side of town.
Right.
So that was my motivation. I found out that, and I'm tying it all into Allentown, how I ended up here and what's happening here.
Yes.
So I go in and I find out the city councilman, Duke Sorey, who was he was the first black city councilman in North Miami, and he really gave my bio, and we talked and everything. He said, George, I'm gonna help you get these courts. So actually, I went to a city council meeting, and you know, they voted on it. They voted on me getting $50,000 seed money to renovate courts on the other side of town. They put new lights in. We cleaned the courts up and everything, and then they gave me a $25,000 a year budget to do an ongoing program. I did a free program for city residents, and then I actually had the contract to do for-profit, and I had a business, GT Services, which was really the forefather of the organization, the business that I set up when I came to Lehigh Valley. So that gave me the framework, you know, and that was a for-profit business, the GTS services there. So I copied that and basically incorporated in Pennsylvania when I moved to Pennsylvania, and I basically did a model program of what we were able to set up in North Miami.
What was when you moved it? I can see in Florida, when you do the tennis, it's one thing, but then to come here to PA, what was the thought process when you spoke to the?
And it's funny. I mean, the way I ended up coming to Allentown it was just by chance. When I moved from Florida, I went through a divorce, and I came up to New York, and a girl I had dated, we ended up getting married. We're married now. We're married for 12 years. She's an attorney in New York.
Awesome.
So what happened was, I didn't have a job or anything at the time. So a buddy of mine that I had met when I worked with the Williams in '94 had a tennis academy here, Bill Adams Tennis Academy. So he invited me to come in and help train him with some of the players here. He had an international academy. I mean, he had clientele coming from all over the country here. So I ended up coming here, transitioning into New York, and that's how I was introduced here. So he was renting a house basically on the west side of town. So he stays here for 2 years. The second year, he's saying, George, he said, I'm going to go back down to Florida. So I ended up buying the house. My wife and I, we were dating. We ended up getting married. I got my divorce and everything. This is a movie too. Don't get me wrong. We're gonna put this together. So
that's it.
So he goes to Florida. I end up transitioning here. I had actually gotten a job in New York. I worked with the United States Tennis Association, Eastern Section. Worked there for 6 years, and I would come back, and we ended up buying the house that he moved out. So I had a base here. I'm originally from North Carolina. To me, I didn't want to live in the city. Allentown was an hour and a half, 2 hours from New York. It worked. It was cheaper than buying a house in New York. So I ended up coming here. So we had the house here. I ended up working with Police Athletic League after working with the USTA for 6 years. So for the first 3 years, getting back on the court with the Police Athletic League at the Harlem Armory, I started training kids again, inner city kids. So during the summer, I would bring the kids here to Allentown.
From New York?
From New York. They would stay in my house.
Awesome, okay.
Because my wife, we live in the house in New York that she grew up in. And I started training kids that really had never been outside of the city.
Wow.
I'd bring them in, and it just so happened our house was 10 blocks from Oakmont Tennis Club. So I became a member there, and kids became members, and we started training, and then local kids weren't even really in my program. So after 3 years, I decided, okay, I was laid off from Police Athletic League. They stopped their tennis program. And I decided, okay, I have a house in Allentown. I'm going to transition to Allentown, and I'm going to build a tennis program. Try to build year-round tennis program. That's the long and short story of how I ended here and how we're building programs through my company here.
And that's where you are right now.
That's where I am here. I'm over at Oakmont. I'm coaching Allen boys team, and I do some teaching at Winning Touch, one of the indoor facilities. I for 3 years I ran an outdoor program with the township of Upper Macungie, and we're just about at capacity with that program. I recently I'm turning that program over to one of my pros that started out at Oakmont with me, so he can grow the program. And so I'm about cultivating, growing, and introducing kids and even adults to tennis, and hopefully they can use tennis as a lifelong sport.
Wow.
And that's where the health and
that's it.
And everything else ties into it. And I'm here.
Right. That's awesome.
That's kind of the
Man, I mean, now here you are up north. and you're getting the program started. It seems like you've already made some inroads.
Okay,
There.
yeah. I met you.
Yeah, exactly.
We connected.
And it seems like, we've known each other for a while, believe it or
Yeah.
not. I don't know, I start saying,
Back
I've
in
seen
the
this
day.
dude.
That's
Yes, I've
right.
seen this
That's
dude
right.
before.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
That's right.
But, and it's just interesting, how, because, right now in the Allentown area, you see a lot of the growth, a lot of the new buildings and structures and investment, $1 billion. How do you feel about that? I mean, to me, it seems like I've seen this before.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So,
Exactly.
in your opinion, do you think that this is something that, can definitely, it gives you a whole lot more opportunity?
I think, I every day I wake up is an opportunity for me, believe me. So it's just one of many opportunities. But I also find frustration. I've been very frustrated in this area because, doors seem like they were open and then really you see they're not really open. And I don't know if it's being a black, young black man, being assertive and going after what you believe. And I just think a lot of, and you probably, can explain this a little better than me, but I mean, being that you're not from here, and a lot of people have been here years and years, and they have a network set up, and I just don't really see a network really set up that, I've gained a lot of friends and a lot of, associates that really understand it and, work with me now, but it was just a struggle to get to that point.
Right.
People would shut the door. They wouldn't let you in. They wouldn't, they critique you more than they critique the average person or something. So,
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
it's just, like I said, been frustrating. And then to really understand the demographics of things that are changing and how they're changing. I mean, I think we all need to figure out a way to work together and be open-minded. I think for me, one of the things that really opened up my eyes was about 2 years ago. I came home from working out at Oakmont in the morning, and I come in and tired. I normally would take a nap during the day and go back out in the evening for evening sessions. But I was in my living room, and I was looking out my window, and then I see signs up, and I see a bunch of people over there. I walk out my door, and it was actually the mayor. And the mayor was actually, and I didn't know all this stuff was going on. The mayor was actually doing a press conference at the house across the street from my house on 29th Street. And so I talked to some of his people and everything, and I said, what's going on? They said, well, we just, the mayor's doing an interview on redlining. Redlining. I didn't know, I was like, redlining? Then I realized redlining is when the realtor only shows a house that's being sold to a specific group of people. And I think there have been, an investigation or whatever with the Realtors Association in Lehigh Valley. This was one of the houses that really they were not showing houses to black families or other minorities or whatever.
Here you come out of your house.
Here I come out of my house, and the funny thing about
that kind of blew up there.
Yeah, I'm like, what's up? And then, they're asking me. I actually introduced myself to the mayor. I said, hey, mayor, how you doing? I'm George Henry, da-da-da. He looked at me. He was like, kind of, what are you doing here? I said, I live there.
Exactly.
How'd you get, I wasn't showed, I basically, my wife and I bought our house because we were introduced to the owners. It wasn't even up for the market. So I kind of bypassed that thing.
Right.
I would have been in the same situation, and we're on the west end of Allentown.
Exactly.
So to put it all in a nutshell, I mean, things like that are undertones, and they're going on each and every day. And a lot of things really haven't changed for us,
Right.
So anybody that's going out and fighting, not necessarily physically fighting, but trying to make a presence and trying to go after something that they've worked hard to get. I mean, they should have the same opportunity.
Right. I agree with you.
So my point is that we got to work through this stuff, and we got to keep building.
Right. What would you like your legacy to be? I mean, you're still a young man, and you've got this is not the end. You got a lot of stuff to go.
I
You got a lot
hope
to go. But you've done a lot of great things. You've touched a lot of great people. You know, I mean, we're talking about world-renowned people. You know, you're in books. You've touched, you know, celebrities / you know, people who they're going to be building their own legacies and stuff. And you're still working with the children. So in turn, you're actually still affecting the future. What would you like your legacy to be when it comes?
I mean, I really, all I would want is for these kids to come up and understand, you know, working hard, not expecting people to give them everything, work hard, and then you have a good feeling about yourself. You work through trying times and rough times, and you get stronger, and you learn to put something back. You learn to reach back and say, hey, you know, I worked, I learned, now I'm going to, you know, sacrifice some time or whatever to help somebody else out. I think, you know, and my grandmother, you know, raised me when I was very, very young. My mother had me when she was in college, and, you know, I had the opportunity to really see that side of her. And she was a, you know, she was a religious woman, but I mean, I didn't know how religious she was until after she died, you know,
wow.
really. She actually died going to church, you know, in an accident. But to see how she's affected so many people's lives and people that were good people, and I didn't know it until she was gone. So I would want to leave basically something like that, to say, hey, you know, he might have been a, you know, hard guy, and you know, he was stern with us, but he gave us something,
right,
to help make us a better person.
And
that's it. I don't, you know, I used to think it was money. It's not necessarily money. I want to be able to afford certain things, but I want to be able to travel. I think everyone should have the opportunity to travel and see the world through someone else's eyes, you know, and then just come back and teach somebody something, you know.
I agree. Well, first of all, George, I want to say thank you. It's been
Thank
an honor
you.
and a privilege for you to come on to Prolific Profile this afternoon. But before we go, how can people get in contact with you if they have any questions or want to find out about it?
They can call me. They can look on my website, g10services.com, GTEN services.com, and all my contact information on that. They can email me any other way, cell phones or whatever.
Right,
you know,
right.
you can contact me anytime. So.
Awesome. Well, once again, thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
George Henry, for coming on Prolific Profile. We appreciate you for, like I said, taking the time. It's been an honor and a pleasure for you to be here. And for all our listeners, we appreciate you all for appreciating us and taking time to listen to us right here on Prolific Profiles, www.prolific.com. Thanks.